How's it going, guys? I hope you're having a good week. Thanks for joining this episode of Homebrew Weekly. I have a few small things to talk about today. I'm behind on my brewing videos. Oh, by the way, check out my wonderful mess. Isn't that wonderful? And I set up the camera and I thought, oh, I've got to clean all this. I've got to clean all this up. It's all homebrew related anyway, so it's all good. I will clean it up though. So I've got some other work to do that I need the space. Last week I sort of pinched off the yeast experiment conversation, but there's been a couple more small questions, so let's address those, okay? And I have an airlock thing I want to talk to you about, and just a few other small little anecdotes too, all right? So let's get started. First, I got a beer mail from a couple of guys, and I didn't bring my glasses over here. I got this beer package from Norway, right? From Paul and Ole. So these guys have sent some beers, and I'm going to be reviewing. They sent 3. I'll review at least 2 of them anyway, and the other third one I'll just drink on my own. But they sent this note. Now I want you to. I hope the camera picks this up. You see notice the edges of this. I'll show the back. The edges of this paper, how they're sort of a little bit, a little brown. I hope this is showing up on the camera. Maybe if I tilt it side to side. And I think that's really cool. This is not a particular stock of paper or type of paper that they wrote this on or typed it on, but it does look pretty cool. What happened was, and I thought this was funny, this was folded like this when they sent it to me, okay? And what I normally do is when someone sends me a beer mail, I will put the beer in my fridge and I'll put the note with the beer so that it doesn't get mixed up. So I know who it's from and I know, which one belongs to which. I put this in my keezer with the beers. Now, with a keezer, because I don't have a kegerator set up, I don't have the taps on the outside. Mine is just I lift the lid, got a little picnic tap there, fill my beer, put it back down. Eventually, and you saw the other week I had the big mess I had to clean out of that thing. The drips and, there's a bit of a mess at the bottom. So what I did was I tried to take a little container, little Tupperware, whatever, some sort of plastic container, and put it in the basket that the freezers have with them, and then put the beer filling picnic tap on top of that so that if it dripped after a pour, it would drip into there. Except the fact that little Tupperware thing or whatever the hell, plastic container got spilt. And so now there's beer all over the inside of my keezer again. In the meantime, this little piece of paper, this note being folded like this, it fell down off of that little basket to the bottom. I know this is a ridiculous little story, but I thought it was funny. It fell down to the bottom of the keezer, and it landed like this, leaned up against the side. And it absorbed some of the beer at the bottom of the keezer. And that's how it got to look like that. But, it's appropriate. I think it's very fitting because it is a homebrew beer mail. And I think that looks pretty cool. I think that some things are just meant to be. I'll be reviewing those beers really soon. I was kind of pissed off when I first found it down the bottom. I was like, oh no, I just laid it out, let it dry, and it's kind of like a little tie-dye thing. In all seriousness, I'll be reviewing those beers real soon. Now, I had a question, and it's something I guess I forgot to cover when we were talking about this whole yeast thing. This thing seems to be going on and on and on because we just keep using the yeast over and over and over again, don't we? One question I did get, and I actually got the question like 3 or 4 times in my last week's video, so I'm going to talk about it. How much of this yeast, and it's a good question, I can't believe I didn't talk about this, how much of it do you use? I wondered the same thing, and I talked to a few friends of mine. I've got a little jar of it here. Now, as you can see, and we're just going to walk over here so we can get a close-up, you've got the yeast at the bottom, and it's a pretty darn good-looking yeast. You've got beer here, and I guess this is a little bit of foam or whatever. Here's another one. This one has a lot more in it. This is from an entire batch. I had a lot of trub, And you can see again, there's the yeast here, and it looks pretty clean. I want you to really take a good look at that. Like, there ain't nothing wrong with that yeast, and I did not wash this. It's been through light, dark, hoppy, not hoppy, everything. I don't have anything against washing yeast, as I said last week, for certain reasons, but I don't do it because I'm going to be using this real soon. Now, there's a lot there. You don't want to pour this whole thing. Although some people do just, you know, they bottle or keg their beer, and then they make a new batch and they just dump it into on top of the old trub. So, you know, basically you're using all that. Right? And they've had no problems. These are experienced home brewers that I've spoken to that have had absolutely no problems with doing that. But there is an issue with over-pitching. Some people are afraid of it. I don't know much about it. I have not looked into over-pitching. There's probably a lot of literature on that and things. This is about how much you really want to use. I mean, am I going to weigh this and tell you how many, you know, milligrams or whatever? Guys, listen, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you know I kind of don't work like that. I'm a home chef. I cook like this. You know, I don't measure stuff. I mean, well, you know, of course when I'm brewing beer, I do measure the weight and the grains and, you know, the amount of things. But when it comes to this kind of thing, excuse me, I still have a bit of a cough. I'm sorry. That much. Okay? I mean, you don't need much. Right? So what you do is you take off the lid, and I'm going to get criticized for this, I'm sure. Like, oh, he doesn't even know how much to put in. It doesn't have to be an exact amount. How do I know how many live yeast cells are in this? I don't know. What am I going to do? Get a microscope and do this whole yeast count thing? You know, the cell count thing? I don't know how many yeast cells are in this thing. If I dumped this whole thing into a batch of beer, it'd probably be fine. I don't know, because I don't know how many live cells and dead cells are in here. You know, we're reproducing this yeast down here in the dungeon, and we're making beer, and we're just dumping it from one to the other. So I apologize, but I am not that I am not that mathematical about this. If you gather your trub from the bottom of your fermenter, take that off, dump out some of the beer, a little bit more. Okay, but leave a little bit of the beer in there, and make sure you smell it. Okay, this one actually smells a little off, so I'm going to throw it out. It's been in there for a while, so screw on the lid again. We're just using it for demonstration purposes. And give it a good shake. And I mean a good shake, because it can gather on the bottom. Okay? Now it looks like there's more in there, but you've mixed the beer with the yeast, and you've probably added some foam and bubbles and whatnot like that. Just dump that into your next batch. Okay? There's no problem. Now I'm not going to use this because it does have a slightly off odor, and that's because it was in the bottom of my teaser for 2-3 weeks, and I don't think that, you know, the reused yeast that hasn't been washed has a very long shelf life. It can go, you know, off a little bit, and it can happen even if you do wash your yeast. You're always risking, you know, something happening to it. And always smell your yeast. Make sure it smells like yeast, and if it does, then you're good to go. But this one here, nah. That smells a little off to me. So I'll set that aside. That's why I always keep extra around. I won't use all of this. I just put this in here, you know, was it 2 days ago? So it's good for the next brew I'm going to do, which is in a couple of days. This will be fine. Keep a few of them around. You know, separate jars if you want to, and, you know, 2 or 3 little jars. I put this all in one. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have split it in half. Put it in 2 separate jars. That way, if one of them goes funny, I can hopefully rely on the other one. I'm sure this is fine because I just put it in here, but I'm not going to open it because I plan on using it in the next couple of days. And also, I have another batch going back here, which also has some fresh trub in it. So there's always lots of fresh yeast around. There's more than you need. And I guess my advice to you is if you're going to do this, maybe put it in separate jars so that if one jar goes bad for some reason, you'll have another one. And I always have a fresh batch cultivating. I would have no problem because that batch is ready to keg. So I've got yeast. So that's good. If it smells like sulfur or something, if it turns you off, don't use it. When you first put it in the jar, smell it. Get a whiff and figure out what it's supposed to smell like. Try to remember it. And then the next time you open it to use it, make sure it smells as good. You don't want to have a farty smell or a eggy smell or anything like that, because then you've got something going on. So I'm going to put this back in the fridge when we're done here. Okay? So you don't need that much. Like, here's the yeast there. This is all beer up here. You could probably get 3 batches out of this. Like 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's a good question. And the answer to it, that much. A little more than that. It's not going to hurt it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And the dead yeast, those are food. That's yeast nutrient. Did you see last week that I showed you the trub on this thing and the blowout I had? That yeast is like, it's healthy. It's because it's not only got sugars to eat, but it's got food because yeast is cannibalizes. It eats its own dead. So you got a healthy product here for homebrew. I'm an old school homebrewer. I know a lot of people use some people use that. I've got mine up there somewhere. It's right there. The Cooper's fermenter. It doesn't have an airlock on it. You put the little collar on it. You put the lid on it. It just does its thing. I'm a fan. I think it's great. But I'm an old school brewer, and I like the airlock because that sort of, to me, is like an indicator. It shows me, okay, I'm looking, it's going every couple of minutes. Okay, it's every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds. I can tell by that airlock when it's time for me to start thinking about possibly packaging the beer. I am not saying that you need to use an airlock. And certainly there are ways of telling by looking at, the beer itself, whether it's done or not. And I'm not talking about a hydrometer right now. I'm just talking about, am I at a point right now where I should test it to see if it's finished with a hydrometer? If the airlock is going blip, 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 obviously, no, I'm not going to touch it. There's no sense in testing it with a hydrometer. If you open the lid, oops, I lost it. Be careful. It's wine, by the way. If you open your fermenter and you look inside and there's lots of foam on top of your beer, chances are it's not done yet. It ain't ready. It's still fermenting. So there are ways of telling without the airlock. But I just come back here. I walk over. I watch. I lean over. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Every 10 seconds. All right, maybe by tomorrow I can, get my hydrometer out and test it and see, if it's ready or not. Here's the thing. You can't really rely on the airlock. And I have to say this because I've had a lot of experience, so I can sort of tell what's going on, and sometimes I have a bad seal or something, and it's not airtight. But some people who are new to this, the airlock is not like the gas gauge in your vehicle. It doesn't always tell you, well, I don't know if the gas gauge does either, but it doesn't always tell you exactly what's going on. It's a good indicator. And if you know your fermenter and if you know your airlock and you know how your equipment works, it is a very good indicator of how far along your beer is. But in my case, I was watching these 2 fermenters. There was a second one going back there a few days ago, which is now kegged. And I was watching them. And that airlock, this one's got a blowout tube on it, so it's different, but the other one had just a plain old airlock. And it was still going like pretty good. Boom. Maybe every 5 seconds. it was flipping. And I'm like, this thing is 2 weeks. How can it possibly still be fermenting? Well, one possibility is an infection, which I highly doubted. Sometimes what happens is there's gas trapped in the beer. When it ferments, you know, it releases CO2. Some of that CO2 can actually get trapped in the beer. And when the beer is done fermenting and producing CO2, then that CO2 that's in the beer can start to come out. And that's what you might be seeing in the last day or two of fermentation, is the airlock activity could just simply be the beer is degassing. Now, so obviously what I did was I got my hydrometer out. You should always have a hydrometer handy for this. I don't use it very often, but it's something you gotta have when you homebrew. This beer looked like it was still fermenting by the airlock. I opened the lid. There was a little bit of foam on top, a little bit of foam. So by those two indicators, I would have thought this is not ready yet. But it was the amount of time that it had been fermenting that made me question it. So I got out my hydrometer and I tested it, and it was 1.008. That's your litmus test right there. You know, the other things, fail. The litmus test is the hydrometer. So please make sure you have a hydrometer around. A lot of questions that I get asked can be simply answered by taking a hydrometer test, or several of them throughout, you know, to see what's going on. You know, you use one of these, you dip it in, and you guys know all this stuff. Most of you do. Take it out. Do it with the hydrometer in the tube. Don't do this, you know, and fill it all the way up to here. And that it looks dirty, but it really is just, it's really old. You know, fill it all the way up to here, and then put this in, because guess what? It just blew the floor, right? So, you know, do it with that in there and get it filled up, you know, and then take the reading. And the important thing here is that when you take the reading, you need to spin the hydrometer, because I could see the bubbles. I could see the gas coming out. I'm like, yeah, there you go. See, that's why the airlock is still going, because there's still gas in the beer. It's coming out. So I could see it, and I could see the bubbles stuck to the bottom of the hydrometer. And guess what that's going to do? That's going to change the reading. That's going to lift the hydrometer up a little bit. Yeah, you know, 1.008 is really low, actually, for beer. Most of the time you get, you know, 1010, 1012, 1014, 1015, maybe even 1020 if it's got a lot of malt in it. If it's a really big beer, you're going to get a higher final gravity reading than 10.8. So anyway, that's that. This is what I use to make my Clamato juice. My Caesars. I love Caesars. It's a Canadian drink. It's basically, I've talked about this before, it's, you know, vodka and Clamato juice. And I think most people can get Clamato juice in North America. Not sure about other countries, but anyway. And so this is something I found in the corner of my basement. I kind of forgot about it. So it's been sitting around for a while. And, you know, when you read the ingredients, if you can read them, which I can't right now, but I know that there's monosodium glutamate in this stuff. And it's a preservative that stops food from spoiling. So when you stop food from spoiling, what you're doing is basically preventing it from fermenting. But fermentation happens naturally every single minute, second of the day. And in this case, it has happened. This Clamato juice, even though it's got monosodium glutamate in it, which is a preservative, has actually fermented, unbeknownst to me. How do I know? Because I haven't opened it yet. Well, look. Here's the identical jar of it. You see? Identical. But look at the difference. This one is normal. It's got the handle on it, you know, to hold it when you're pouring it. But this one is completely bulged. I hope you guys can see that. Even the bottom. Look at the bottom. Look at the bottom. I've lined them up correctly. Look at the lid. Even the lid is bulging. Everything's bulging. So, all I wanted to get across with this, guys, is that fermentation is a natural process. And it happens all the time. Anytime you leave some food out or leave some juice, whatever, it's gonna ferment. The difference is that when you seal it up and control the fermentation, you don't get a horrible tasting, thing with mold on it. You get a controlled fermented product like beer and wine and other things, right? This fermented all by itself, even though I didn't add any yeast to it, and it's got preservative. So, you guys who are new to home brewing, I just want you to realize that, you really can't screw this up. I'm sorry about my throat. I'm still getting over the cold, and I still have, things going on. So I do apologize. You really can't screw this up. Apart from lack of sanitation and lack of, care, you can't screw this up. It works even when you don't expect it to. Now, I'm going to open this. I'm not going to drink it, obviously. I'm going to pour this out. But I'm going to open it. And I'm going to smell it. And I'm going to tell you what I think. Hey? Listen, I'm not going to drink this. But if I was in a jail cell or out in the trenches, out, somewhere in a war somewhere, this is an alcoholic beverage. You could get drunk off of this, or you could certainly catch a good buzz off of it. It does not smell bad. This is an alcoholic version of clamato juice, fermented all by itself. Now, just to prove to you that I'm not going to drink it, for those of you who might think I'm desperate, I'm not. There. All right? But it just proves a point. If you buy a jar or a bottle of, say, apple juice, right? And you open it, you leave it out for, let's say, an hour, 2 hours, maybe. Leave it out for a while. Give it a little shake, leave it out again, just a couple hours, 3-4 hours, whatever. And then put the lid back on. Maybe leave it a little bit loose, little bit loose. And then set it aside somewhere. I can't guarantee you, but I can almost bet that that's going to ferment all by itself without you adding any yeast to it at all. Okay? Now, of course, we don't know what yeasts are going to get in there and, what strains of yeast are going to get in there. And as we know, yeasts are very pivotal. They do affect the flavor of the product a lot. So if you get a bad strain of yeast in there, it might taste like crap. Might even turn to vinegar or something like that. And so that's why we add our own yeast to it to control the fermentation and make it ferment the way we want it to ferment and add the bugs that we want in there. And of course, once our yeast takes over and sets up house, it will kill everything else in there anyway, hopefully. Not as if you didn't let something else get in there ahead of time. So I just thought of this, when I found that, I thought of you guys. And I just thought it was a kind of a cool experiment that I didn't expect. And if I was desperate, I would have drank that. There was nothing wrong with that. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. I have new t-shirt designs coming out. They're in the making right now. Got some final decisions to make. So start saving your pennies. Start putting your, quarters and nickels and dimes in a jar. And maybe in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some new t-shirts out for you. So if you're interested, well, there you go. That's the news with the t-shirts. tgtshirts.com. Brand new designs, and I'm loving the way these things are looking. So thanks for your support in the past, and thank you ahead of time for your future support as well. I'm out. Thank you so much. I'll see you on my live broadcast Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, vaughnlive.tv/CraigTube. I'll see you on the 17brewcrew.com forum, And I'll see you back here on YouTube real soon. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy your beer. Enjoy your brew. And keep those beers coming. Yep, there's my dog throwing up over there. Beautiful end to the video. Cheers.